All right, good evening, everyone. As we begin this meeting, I'll ask everyone to please silence cell phones and other electronic devices and remind council that our procedure bylaw prescribes the use of electronics during council meetings. It's 6:30 p.m. I'll call this council meeting to order. And as we begin this meeting, I acknowledge that we are gathered on traditional territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe. This land holds significant historical, cultural, and spiritual importance for the Mississauga nations, who are the collective stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters. We recognize and respect the enduring connection that the Mississauga Anishinaabe, now of Alderville, have to this land and these waters, and express our gratitude for their stewardship over generations. As we discuss matters of importance for our community, we commit ourselves to fostering a spirit of reconciliation and partnership with Indigenous neighbors and all Indigenous peoples. May we strive for understanding, respect, and collaboration as we work together to support our inclusive and just community. I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that Council approve the June 1st, 2026 agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Members of Council, have you any declarations of interest, and if so, the general nature thereof? There are none noted. Are there any announcements this evening? Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to everyone who came out for the Pride flag raising today. We had a very good showing of council and staff and senior staff and members of the community. It was maybe the biggest flag raising of any kind that I've seen here. And so great event. Thank you to everyone and happy Pride, everyone.
Indeed, thank you. Any other announcements? Councillor Bradley.
Just so that we recognize that this is Parks and Rec Week. So if we can give a shout out to all of our employees that work over at King Edward Park and all of the grass cutting that they've already been doing. Just want to wish them good and a great summer.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeldon.
I remembered another one. It is also Accessibility Awareness Week. And so good opportunity for everyone to reflect on how to include everyone in our community, whether that's through our built environment or our neighborliness.
Thank you. Anyone else? I have a couple. Yesterday, I was pleased to be able to walk in the Alzheimer's Society fundraising walk held in Brighton for the second year in a row. The Alzheimer's Society of Prince Edward Hastings is extremely grateful to this council for our support of their programming, and then they certainly recognize, as do we, the need for that group to have that programming here in Brighton. Of course, Music in the Park starts up again on Wednesday at 6:30 in Memorial Park. And as a tradition, we kick off with Brighton's own Bentwood Rocker. This Thursday up in Codrington, Brighton Fire will host the Northumberland Mutual Aid team celebrating 75 years of mutual aid support with a show by the Canadian Forces demonstration parachute team, the Skyhawks. The public is welcome to come. Parking for the public will be, although limited, at the Codrington Community Centre. The Skyhawks are expected to jump at 7 p.m. It is also Indigenous History Month, and so at some point this month we will fly the flag of Alderville. We'll do that later in the month as Indigenous Peoples Day approaches. I will get it up for that week, over that week. And of course, June is also Seniors Month, which is an important month to recognize in our municipality. So June is a busy month of recognizing the things. Did I look at you? That makes total sense, I think. Are there any other announcements this evening? Moving on to the adoption of the minutes. It's moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that Council adopt the May 19th, 2026 Council meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. We have no statutory public meeting this evening. There are no delegations or presentations. Madam Clerk, are there any citizens' comments that you're aware of? Thank you. That brings us to Public Works and Infrastructure Report, portable temporary traffic signals at Main Street and Ontario Street. Director Lennon, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, since the detour has been activated for the Prince Edward Street construction project, staff have looked at a number of traffic calming measures to implement along the route. Main Street and Ontario Street are arterial roads, so they require maybe a different way of thinking about traffic calming. Long-term plans for potential signalized intersection at this intersection are being considered. So we had an opportunity to look at what we could do temporarily. So this report lays out, the options, the feasibility of the temporary signals, also some of the challenges that come with it. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor McCausland, that council receive the staff report regarding the use of temporary traffic signals at the intersection of Main Street and Ontario Street, and that council approve the installation of portable temporary traffic signals at the intersection of Main Street and Ontario Street for the duration of the detour route established to manage traffic for the Prince Edward Street reconstruction project in 2026. And the council directs staff to enter into an agreement with Archer Traffic Control for the supply, installation, and maintenance of portable temporary traffic signals. And further, that the cost for the rental and operation of the portable temporary traffic signals be drawn from the contingency fund. Questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Director Lennon. I know when we see traffic signals on, say, Highway 2 or county roads, they usually have like 3-minute intervals. Is that how this is going to work?
Through the mayor, so the company that provides the signals have recommended timing, and they'll be around when they do the initial setup to kind of tweak that timing. It'll be a bit of a learn as we go for peak times, but we'll have the ability to adjust timing remotely. It's suggested in the report that we take advantage of that monthly fee to do that, and staff will be able to do that ourselves, either at the signals or remotely. That's the plan.
Yeah, that was part of my second question is all. It's going to be like 24/7, because I'm sure after 9 or 10 o'clock at night, people don't need to be waiting 3 minutes. If there were malfunctions with this, who gets notified? Is that Public Works that has to look after that? Or do we have to wait for someone from this company to come into town?
Director.
Through the mayor. So that was part of the recommendation for this company, because they will provide that service remotely. Again, that's a key feature in the feasibility of temporary signals for this duration. If there's an issue, we can contact them. They're prepared to respond 24/7. My guess is that primarily they'll try to fix any issues remotely. But staff will be trained as well if we need to do something at the signals, adjust timing or something like that.
Thank you both. Councillor Butwell.
Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor, to Director Lennon. So I did read the report a couple times. I read them last Thursday. Was there any mention of pedestrian crossing there as well? Because I suspect that if we're going to start stopping traffic, we're going to have people crossing because the Y is there. And I know that that intersection has been previously identified as one that we might be looking at doing an actual full street lighted intersection at. So just wondering if that's been looked at all.
Director.
Thank you. And through the mayor, long-term plans would be a full signalized intersection with pedestrian movement at all quadrants at that intersection. Currently, there are no crosswalks there. In the report, I touched on the ability of this company to provide a pedestrian signal head. They're not able to put it on Ontario Street because there's a retaining wall on the southeast quadrant, and we'd have to block the sidewalk. So it wouldn't make a lot of sense to have pedestrians cross it to a closed sidewalk. They have suggested that there's a possibility of directing traffic across Ontario Street with this temporary type signal. And in the report, I've suggested that maybe we consider that as a second phase and do a little more research on that, because we currently don't have pedestrians crossing there. When the signals were removed, it could cause some confusion that you could cross in the summer, but you can't cross after. So it's just something staff would like a little more time to look into before we commit to something like that. With the stop condition at Ontario, traffic or pedestrians should have an easier access, at least across Ontario on Main, where the sidewalk is on the south side, because there will be stop traffic.
Follow up?
Yes, if that's fine. Again, to Director Lennon, through you, Mr. Mayor, that retaining wall, that I do remember reading it now. So thank you for that. That retaining wall, is that something that in the after of this whole project, when we do look at that intersection as a whole, that is something that could be worked with, mitigated, changing changing the intersection itself? Because it doesn't look like it's all that far from the property, the house, the foundation. Because without realigning something, it doesn't look like that corner is going to be terribly safe.
Director?
Through the mayor, that'll be part of the design engineering that goes into reviewing that intersection, what can be done, what can't be done. The retaining wall creates a challenge. It needs to be there for the structure of the house that's on that corner. And we also have to face the challenge of Princess Street across the road on the north side of Ontario. So I would think at this point, we'd be looking at what are options to realign the road. There might be a way to kind of put a little bit of a curve on Ontario Street to realign that road and maybe possibly move it away from the retaining wall slightly, but that'll all be determined through a engineer review.
Thank you. Councillor Wright?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Director Lennon, just wondering, do you anticipate that light slowing down traffic at all on Main Street? And I ask only because myself and another business who called me today have noticed that with the congestion of traffic on Main Street, when there's been a light at where the Royal Bank is there, and then it kind of opens up as traffic proceeds west, there's a few people who are kind of using it as a launch ramp to then get out of Brighton well over the speed limit, and it's becoming a little bit dangerous, especially as there's some people still crossing pedestrian crossing further east from that as well. So I'm just wondering, will that impact at all the speed?
Director?
Through the mayor, I guess the hope would be that it does. Certainly the closer you get to Ontario Street, there'll be advanced signal signs, so signals ahead. So those will be spaced easterly from the intersection well in advance. So I think human nature you would hope that they would see those signs and start to adjust their speed for a potential stop condition. But we all know sometimes people don't follow suggested signs, but that would be the hope.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you both. Anyone else? What would it take to expedite the study for permanency of signalization?
Thank you, and through you. So we've talked with infrastructure team about what that would look like. Because it is in the transportation master plan, we have been having those conversations. Typically, permanent signals would involve a traffic study and the engineering design, not just for the signal and the signal timing, but looking at realigning that intersection and potentially some underground infrastructure improvements. And that would typically happen 1 year and then construction in the next year. So to expedite that, we would have to move forward with the traffic study and that engineering work in 2026 to procure the construction in 2027.
Thank you for that. I would be curious to have a report on what that cost would look like, if we can. Just here's my worry. By the way, thank you. I've been harping on this concept of getting signage or signalization at this intersection since we were eyeballing construction and realizing that the impact on Ontario Street was going to be significant. And I'm not the only one. I receive at least every other day an email from someone who lives along Ontario Street or south of the tracks asking, can we signalize Ontario and Maine? So thank you to staff for seeing the value in this and carrying on with this project. My concern is that we do this, we take them away, and everyone's going to go, well, it worked. Why did you take them away? And when will you bring them back? So I think if we can start down this road, I think it would help for a more permanent solution to this.
Thank you. And through you, I agree, Mr. Mayor. It'll also give us an opportunity to maybe learn some lessons at this intersection that we can use to inform what the permanent situation might look like. Yeah, I think we all agree that the Transportation Master Plan was accurate in recommending signals at this intersection.
It wouldn't be Brighton if it wasn't an intersection with an odd jog. That's for sure. So we have a number of them. Is there any further comment on this motion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Thank you. Next report is follow-up committee structure review. Deputy Clerk, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, I think I will highlight this time just so that I can have some comment and mention that you're welcome to ask questions of me and maybe we can come to a resolution together. So just for the sake of the mayor and the deputy mayor who were not present at any of these meetings, the comments that are included in the report are strictly those of the community members on the committees. I had started each conversation with the committees by stating that I didn't necessarily want to hear from the council members that are on the committees because they have a separate opportunity prior to these conversations and a separate opportunity today to voice those opinions. And I wanted the committee members to truly be able to say what they felt and what they wanted to see or not see, good or bad, without any kind of committee member or council member input. So that those charts with the comments are strictly those of the community, your community members appointed to these committees. It was tough conversations. The very mixed views all over. There's some good that can be seen and some unfortunate comments that were given. Overall, no clear path forward based on specifically the three that were originally recommended for consolidation. The other two, Apple Fest and Community Events Steering Committees, were both quite clear that they felt that it would be too large of a workload to combine those two committees. While they do recognize that there are some efficiencies that would help with staffing and vendor duplication that happens between the two committees, the workload of the volunteers appointed would be too heavy, and they would be concerned that volunteers would not stay for those longer meetings and for the workload that would come with combining all of those events. So still staff can see the benefit of combining these committees while recognizing that there are some unknowns about this type of consolidation. Brighton doesn't have a working group right now. So having those conversations was not easy. There was questions about, what that would look like and how things would work. And unfortunately, my answer is not really sure. Like, we're going to blaze this trail together. We wouldn't know until we kind of got working. And there's definitely some opportunity for tweaks if things aren't working along the lines. The other parts of the conversation were questions about how many committee members for each kind of subject matter, and just questions I couldn't really fully answer because that's a kind of a conversation that has to happen here and a council decision that needs to be made. And concerns about the work plans and what that looks like and how that all those pieces fall. So just some high level information. We have some council members that were at these meetings as well, and also diligently took notes just like I did, and are here to speak for their committees as well.
Thank you. I won't read the motion because the motion says council provides staff with direction, and then it says the same thing again. So I'm going to open the floor for discussion, and we will come up with a motion for direction on the two items. It may be a do nothing motion. It may be, here's the consolidation effort we'll go through. So members of council, Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the comments that I've gotten from a lot of people is asking what the purpose of the consolidation is, and is there efficiency to be gained and things like that. But I think it's really important to note that when you're sitting in a meeting with these committees, I sit on two of the three that are being recommended for consolidation, and the feeling of frustration at those meetings is palpable. And so the status quo is not working. And so it's not a matter of taking something, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's broke. And in some ways has been from day one, thinking specifically of when we started the sustainability committee last term, we spent that whole first year trying to figure out, are we a doing committee or an advising committee? And we ended up coming down on advising committee for this term. But at our last meeting, I asked everyone, would you rather be an advisor or a doer? And every single one said doer. And so the question becomes, what do we do as a committee? Are we, a garden club? Are we doing something small and hands-on that is very tangible for us? And if so, do we need that to be a municipal committee? Or are we going to take on some big project? And if so, is that something for volunteers, or is that something we should be directing staff or recommending to council direct staff to do? And so finding the sweet spot of that has been in many ways the story of both sustainability and justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion throughout this entire term, of trying to figure out, okay, well, what is it that we actually want to do? And what are we supposed to advise council on? So one of the things that I've heard loud and clear throughout this entire process is that if council has advisory committees, we need to ask their advice. And in some cases, that has been a matter of us needing to be more engaged as a council with our committees and recognizing that we do need to seek their advice. I've had some conversations with some members of staff. I was talking with Director Walsh about what would be the right procedure for that. And he said something about how it should be council that asks the committee for advice. But then thinking about the logistics of that might be a 3-month turnaround by the time something comes to council and then gets referred to a committee that meets 4 times a year and then comes back to council. And so, procedure sometimes can be a challenge, but that's the other side of it, is that procedure is a challenge. Talking with people from all 3 of those committees, there was some confusion of how do things actually get to council. And all 3 of those committees at different times had people expressing surprise at the fact that we discussed something at committee and it didn't go to council, even though we had not passed any resolution recommending anything to council. And so in some cases, that was incumbent upon me as the embedded counselor to say, well, we need to move that. Or I need to bring that up when the minutes are discussed or something like that. We've gotten better about discussing what happened at committee meetings through the minutes. And I appreciate you always asking us, do you have anything to add to those minutes? I think I've managed to convey a lot of what happens at a meeting through that. But I've also had committee members very surprised that minutes do not include every aspect, every word of our conversation. And so through that, we've identified that there are challenges with training of committee members. We get a lot of information when we start on a committee, but we don't necessarily get a training scenario or a training program, if you were. And the fact that there are people who are surprised at the end of the term about how the procedure works indicates that whatever we're doing just isn't sticking. And that's fair. There are parts of my day job that I only have to do a couple times a year, and I have to learn it from scratch every time. And I'm always asking my admins at work, can you remind me how to do that thing that I do every year, please? So I'm not surprised that people who come to a meeting every 3 months don't always remember every aspect of procedure. And so I do carry the weight of that because I'm the one who's here at all the meetings, and I should be able to remember, we need to move that. So I think more robust training for the members of the committees. And I'm wondering also if we should recommend that citizen committees be chaired by councillors. I haven't tried at times to support and empower community members to chair committees because I want them to have that experience, and I want to give that sense of ownership. But again, it might be asking a lot to have somebody in that position where they're in charge of putting together an agenda and remembering procedure and all of those things. I know in Port Hope, they recently passed a bylaw saying that all resident committees are chaired by councillors for that reason. That's something that I would suggest we consider. And similarly with work plans, I love that the deputy clerk has framed this as working groups, working committees that are oriented around a work plan. And as I said, everybody on sustainability is a doer. They want to be working on something. But a work plan is kind of like a business plan. Unless you've done one, it sounds pretty intimidating and it's a lot to ask of someone. And so having that upfront support from staff or from a consultant, there are groups that do trainings like this on a grant program that are more or less free. That could be an opportunity to help set up groups of working volunteers who are able to attack a work plan on their own time without requiring clerk support at every single meeting, without requiring all of that procedure, and then maybe having a delegate to a committee like the Connected Community Working Group that's been proposed here, to be able to say, okay, our group of 10 people at the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee are doing this, 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 and this on our work plan. Here's my report about that as the chair to the Connected Community Working Group for this quarterly meeting. And these are the things we recommend to council without having to have every single one of those people be going through the entire meeting process, but being able to coordinate amongst themselves, I think could be really empowering to them, which does mean a little bit of letting go for us. But I think could provide more flexibility for them and could be a lot easier on our staff. So those are some of my thoughts. I'm going to let others speak.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Councillor Botwell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I agree with a lot of what Councillor Wheeldon spoke about. Just before, because my brain is getting wrapped up, right at the end, you said about like the committee would then go in through the working group, but we're talking about replacing the committee completely and only having a working group. That's how I understand it. So I like that idea of having different committees taking their items to a working group where each committee still has their area of expertise and it's more than just one or two people. But I just noticed that when you said that, I thought, I like that idea, but that's not what we're talking about. Or it could be what we're talking about. It could be, but again, this goes back to without knowing what it's going to look like, it's really difficult for committee members who are not feeling heard to want to essentially let go of it when they don't know what's coming back to them. So I would love to see some more of a structure, a proposal of what this is actually going to look like if we are in favor of it, rather than say, yep, we're going to do it and then hope what comes back is what we intended. So that would be my opinion on that. At first hearing, you say committees being chaired by councillors. My first idea or my first thought was resistance. right? Because it's much more of a top-down structure, and committees should be where the members of the community do the work in concert with everybody, in concert with each other and with us. However, I also recognized that very real issue that we've seen, which is that the committee member doesn't necessarily, committees as a whole and the members don't necessarily understand what the rules are and how they're to be applied and what their obligations are. That does not seem to have trickled down far enough. And by setting that example, by keeping the meetings running in a timely way, by ensuring that motions are being made or asking for a motion, much like you run a meeting, Mr. Mayor, I think that could be helpful, at least in an interim capacity, or whether that is, it is co-chaired. And until such time that that co-chair understands how it works, maybe that might be a way to do it, that you bounce back and forth. So you lead by example and hope people are absorbing just through osmosis. In speaking about the items coming back to council, or some of the committee members not really understanding how come things don't filter upwards because the process wasn't necessarily been followed. I think that as counselors, not only the public, but this ultimate recording of committee meetings that's coming will be a good thing. It will allow us to go back and see the discussion behind the minutes that come to us at council. You could choose to watch them. If anything looks interesting, you could choose not to watch them. But I think, as Councillor Wilden said, the status quo is not working. And I do think very strongly, I've said this to our deputy clerk, I think that this council has maybe not used the muscle that we have to push things back down to our committees. We have failed in that back and forth, that give and take. And I think that by our failing to do so, to perhaps train, educate, refer back, seek out advice and opinions, that we have done a disservice, and the committee members are feeling disenfranchised because of it. So yes, it's not working. Yes, it is broken, but I think it can be a very good system that we have, provided that we are all working in concert with each other. So I am not myself in favor of amalgamating these committees into a working group when we've just not done the greatest job either. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make one short comment. Deputy Clerk, you did a great job at those meetings that you were at. I sat through two of them as well, specifically Applefest and community events. And I agree with your recommendation that we do not amalgamate those two groups. There was a lot of good commentary from both of them, and it came down to the same common denominators as far as Applefest is too big. It needs its total focus. And we don't want to water down either that event or what we do for community events as well. But I do have concerns going forward, 2027 and on, regardless of who's sitting here, that we are going to struggle a lot more to get volunteers to work on these committees. It's very rolled up sleeves committee. It's a lot of work, and absolutely we should not be amalgamating them, because we're going to have a struggle just to fill both of them with volunteers to keep those events going.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor McCausland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Just a short comment that all of the meetings that I sat through as well, Deputy Clerk did a great job with kind of refereeing all of the conversations. Not all of them were negative, some of them were positive. I just think that one of the main concerns that kind of Councillor Riley had already mentioned was bringing people back to the community, or to the committees, and volunteering within the community. And I think that if we're going to go to the working group, having more than 2 representatives for those working groups within the bigger working group would bring more people to the table, so there's not just 2 people taking on that bigger workload.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wilden.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to address that because that was something that came up at both Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and Sustainability, was not wanting to have fewer people involved. Now, I recognize that one of the challenges, one of the logistical challenges we're facing that's kind of pushing this in the first place is that we effectively hire members. They're volunteers, yes, but they do get paid, although many of them, maybe even most of them, do not claim their pay. But it is a hiring process, and I know that Deputy Clerk has had a hard time getting people to apply for these positions. And so it is a challenge getting enough people to even make adequate quorum sometimes, not least because we don't have large committees in the first place and we have difficulty filling the seats. So one of the things that I wonder about and which wants or lends me to think back to what I was saying earlier about having a group of volunteers who then maybe would send delegates to the working group, is that sometimes it's easier to get volunteers in a less formal fashion than it is to go through a hiring process, potentially competitive hiring process for a committee position. And similarly, the procedure of meetings can be intimidating to some. And so the idea of having a working group that is made up of unregulated volunteers, for lack of a better term, that can be actively doing work in the community, and then having their chair and vice chair or co-chairs, as Councillor Bothwell mentioned, being the delegates to the working group that the Deputy Clerk has described, that can bring reports from that group, that can, that would allow the volunteers to be more active, less formal, less intimidating, and still feel like they are empowered to do good work that is supported by the municipality, but with less procedure, less pomp and circumstance, and all of the things that come with sitting around in this room sometimes. And so in that regard, I think that it's possible to use the proposed structure without actually diluting those voices, but just actually it would be really a streamlining of processes. I remember when in the last term when we were the Sustainability Advisory Working Committee, we did not have clerical support, and but we also didn't have a budget. And so it was a little bit of a Wild West because I was the chair and I barely knew what I was doing. And we were coming up with whatever we wanted to do and just trying to do it. This, I think, could be a significant improvement over that, insofar as there would still be some structure. There would be a structured work plan. There would be a structured reporting system through that central committee or working group, the Connected Community Working Group. There would be opportunities for cross-pollination between those three groups, which I also think is important and was part of the original vision. But that formal reporting process doesn't have to apply to everybody who wants to help out and support that issue or that approach. So if rural folks want opportunities to work on projects together or to give input into what their experience is, they don't necessarily have to put out a resume. They might just be able to go to a group of volunteers in their community and have that discussion, and then have the co-chairs of that group bring that to the working group and express that on their behalf. Does that make sense? It's having some less formal, some more formal, ultimately reducing the amount of staff time and work that goes into getting those reports from them, but giving people more informal time to do the work, because that's what they really wanted to do in the first place. Does that make sense?
What you're saying makes sense. I'm not sure the concept works for me, but what you're saying makes sense. Councillor Bothwell.
So again, it is kind of like a hybrid model of what we have and what has been proposed in the report. But what is proposed in the report does not include those provisions, and they're not guaranteed to be there. So it's kind of a bit of pie in the sky.
Well, it's like
Okay.
he's asking us for input.
Okay. And I think it's a longer
Yeah.
discussion
Yeah,
than,
we're going to provide direction tonight, and I suggest that what will happen out of that direction will be a report back to council from staff's perspective, what they think we said.
But you,
which we can then provide clarification on. So, and we have time on this. It's not, and nothing urgent here.
okay.
It's good to work through this, and I like the conversation we're having.
Yeah, and I do like that idea of still having. I don't know if we're talking. It's the words that we're saying that are mattering, but essentially continuing to have a committee, but actually have a direction for something to funnel through, right? I can see that, putting more structure to it. But that funneling being through, if it's called a connected work community working group, those two people, those two co-chairs, whatever they might be. But I think it's important, it's imperative that at least with the two committees that I sit on, that those groups of people continue to have access to each other in a more formal setting. Like, I don't want it to just be volunteers who meet at the park on Thursday and half the people, say, well, I'm kind of feeling tired today. I don't feel it. Like, I'd like to see there be an actual this is our meeting date. If it is a working group, do we just not need staff to be there? Like, if I could ask the deputy clerk. So that group that's working and doing the idea and the brainstorming can funnel it up to the more formal structure.
Through you, Mayor, to council. So if I can kind of summarize how I understand Councillor Wielden's point, then maybe we can kind of flow from there. I think what Councillor Wielden is suggesting is, and again, the numbers are council decision, but the current proposed is 2 for each subject on the connected community. So a committee of 6 or a working group of 6. With that said, and again, I think a lot of Councillor Wielden's comments are coming mainly from the environmental sustainability group. It's still a rather large committee that wants to go out and do the work, and maybe not all of them having to come to a meeting. And I think what you're kind of explaining is that group remains a group and stays in contact and helps. Maybe 2 of them are appointed as the representatives on the connected community working group, but they still meet and do some things, but those 2 are the members of the connected community working group, and similar would be for the other subjects. So there would be, say, 2 rule, 2 justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And those 2 would be, I don't want to say recruiting their own little committee, but working with like-minded community members to do some of the work, and then still coming back to this connected community group to get some input from the others. Can I just get quick clarification from Councillor Wielden that was?
Councillor Wielden.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that we heard specifically at sustainability, but that I was hearing a little bit at justice, equity, diversity, inclusion as well, and heard in conversation with members of the rural committee as well, is that they don't want, and it shows up in the notes here, they don't want their committee to be diluted down to just 2 people. They want there to be a lot of opportunity for people to engage with it. But at the same time, when you go to those meetings, very often, either there's a lot of discussion and no resolutions, or there's no discussion at all, because people want to be out doing. And so the idea of like, still have a group of people, still have regular meetings, but if your meeting is actually working on a thing rather than making recommendations to council, you don't necessarily need to have Jessica there, because what's she going to take minutes of? If you're not having any resolution, she can't have minutes. And so the idea being, still have that group. I mean, especially with justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, the whole idea is to have representation of the many diverse faces in Brighton. And if we only have 2 people, that really limits how much diversity we get to support. But at the same time, do we need every single aspect of diversity to be present at every meeting? Or can we have a larger group that can be part of the community that is sending its delegates to the formal meeting periodically, maybe with recommendations for council, maybe just with updates on their work plans. Does that make sense?
Deputy Clerk?
Yeah, so through you, that's kind of how I thought that you were suggesting it. So Councillor Boutwell, in that case, yeah, as Councillor Wheeldon's explaining, staff wouldn't need to be present when these groups of volunteers meet to gather and talk about getting this work done that they want to do from their work plan. And then the two more, let's call them the formal members of the connected community group would be the ones coming back and reporting from their group of their subject matter.
Councillor
Yeah,
Boutwell?
thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm gonna stick back on this one point because what I'm hearing is one thing, what I think is gonna happen is an entirely different thing. And so I want to make sure that I'm hearing clearly. We have council, we're gonna have this connected community working group, and on that connected community working group are going to be 3 pairs, trios, whatever, representation for these 3 currently existing advisory committees. Are we together so far? Okay. If we are looking at a hierarchical structure, we then have the layer below those 2 senior members, we'll call it. Is the group that is below those senior members, the people who are on the connected community working group, is that formal? Is that struck? Is that put together by the municipality? Or it's just, we're hoping somebody comes and says they want to do something?
I think that's to be determined. That's what we're talking about right now.
Okay, so that is not what I want to see. Because that is actually taking away the seats at the table. Before we had the Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Advisory Committee, before it was struck, we had the conversation about creating seats at the table, hearing diverse voices, hearing experiences. It was a back and forth and all together. And we actually talked about having 1 vacant seat open as being symbolic for there's always extra room for somebody in this community to come and be a part of this committee. Without those working groups underneath those senior people, without that being formalized, I cannot support it. And so I would suggest that while I'll be voting against this completely, I fully expect it to move forward, that be encapsulated in whatever plan you bring forward, because otherwise there's no point in having those groups to begin with.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, I understand your concern. That was not in my recommendation, that plan. That's just kind of a discussion that I think is happening naturally here at council based on council members being present at the committee meetings and just trying to find a path forward. Not something I had suggested necessarily, but I could see how it could work or not work.
And if I may follow up,
Yeah.
I think it's also important to recognize that the people who have continued to come and step forward and try to do the work, whether it was being done entirely correctly or not, there was at least the commitment to doing something. That's where that pay comes in with our community. It is an acknowledgement that you are contributing, and we are welcoming that, and we are essentially compensating for that as well. And to put all of that kind of boots on the ground work onto an unpaid volunteer is not fair. This idea that we get to sit in this room and be compensated, but the people doing the actual boots on the ground work aren't, doesn't feel right. So I think it does, that group of people below each of, I'll call them pods, that they continue to be compensated appropriately is important as well, which totally takes out the whole, this is a bit of a, spending too much money thing. But I think if people are going to do the work, they should be fairly compensated.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? I have a few items and I'm going to do one at a time because I think they may generate some conversation. So the first is someone from the Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Committee approached me and suggested that there might be an opportunity, or maybe should be an opportunity, to include their work in the Accessibility Committee. And I know the Accessibility Committee is a statutory committee. And so I would ask the clerk, is there opportunity to I'm not suggesting we do this, I'm just asking to reframe the terms of reference of the Accessibility Committee to include that justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. The theory being, if the Accessibility Committee is here to reduce and remove barriers, should we not also be asking them to reduce and remove social barriers as well as physical barriers? Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. That was a discussion that was discussed back in March when I originally brought the report, the possibility of combining those two committees. I have reached out to my network of accessibility staffers. Not always an accessibility coordinator. Sometimes it lands under a different title. But our group of accessibility professionals that I have across the province, and the general consensus of everybody was that combining those two committees would be a extremely difficult balance. So in my report, I reference the legislation in the AODA and the requirements of the accessibility committees struck by council, and the requirements for membership. The requirements for membership is that the majority of members are required to be persons with disabilities. Unfortunately, with the way it's written, we have a couple of great members who are not persons with disabilities, but have extensive experience through their careers. Whether that be, sidewalks, we have somebody who has a public works background and he has great insight about those types of things. And we also have somebody who's I don't know her exact title, but she works with persons with disabilities and has great insight as well. And unfortunately, despite all of their experience and knowledge, they don't count towards that requirement. So to say that it can't happen is not true. It could happen, and we could reframe the terms of reference for the next term to continue or put that forward. It would just then become a very tight balance to ensure that we're still meeting that legislative requirement for membership for the Accessibility Committee.
Okay, thank you. I think that does answer my question, because it would then water down the justice, equity, diversity, inclusion component of that team, and we wouldn't want to do that at all, unless we were able to find people with justice, equity, diversity, inclusion wants that are also willing to say they have disabilities. So I just don't think it's thank you. Appreciate your answer. Any comment on that before I move on to my next point? My concern with the concept of keeping the pods the way they are, keeping the advisory committees the way they are, sort of, and then having two co-chairs, or whatever we're going to call them, create a connected community working group, is that we're just creating another layer of procedure, another layer of bureaucracy for people to wade through, when in fact, if we're going to do that, why don't we just simply say, we're keeping these committees the way they are, and we're expecting the chair and the vice chair, the two co-chairs, whatever we're going to call them, to come in and delegate to council on a fairly regular basis, because then council becomes more connected to our committees and becomes that connected community working group. And I don't think that's a bad thing either, if we have that connection and that role for our committees. And I think maybe that's the gap that's been missing, is, we have two members go to each of these committees, but the rest of us, I know I can go to all the committees, but life's busy. So I don't get to all the advisory committees unless, they show up in my calendar. I'm like, oh, I do have an hour available. So I think it would be great to have the chairs and co-chairs come and delegate from time to time, And it doesn't have to be through the formal delegation process of council. We could have a different line item on our agenda that provides that opportunity in much the same way I now say, member of council who's on that team, do you have anything to add to these minutes? We could actually have the chair come forward and offer insights and suggestions. So I just throw that one out there, Councillor Wielden.
Thank you, Mayor. That was something that came up at sustainability. We had two members of sustainability. It was their first ever meeting, and they were having that conversation, and so they didn't know how things are. Before they started asking how should things change, and so I really appreciated having their perspective there. And one of them said, "Well, if we're bringing a recommendation to council, we should actually bring it. We should go to that meeting." And I think you're right that it is a step further to the way that you ask us to comment on the minutes. I've actually noticed that when I comment on the minutes, typically I'm commenting on the latest meeting that we've had, which is usually not the meeting of the minutes that we're discussing. Usually I'm giving you an update.
And I think that's okay, because the minutes that we're talking about are 3 or 4 months old by the time they come to council.
Right.
And so for you to be discussing the last meeting you had a week ago, I think is great, because then council's more or less up to date.
That's good. I sometimes worried that I was out of order, but I'm glad that you agree with me on that. But then the idea of if we are making a concerted effort to always have a recommendation to council from each meeting, and then we have at least one member of that committee come to council to present that recommendation, then I think that creates a much different dynamic that I think would be really welcomed. We had also discussed similarly, but slightly different, the possibility of having, as part of the staff report template, right next to, somewhere between financial implications and strategic plan alignment, committee engagement as just a part of every single report. Not all of them are going to have obvious committee engagement, but just to have that be baked into that process, so that, if we're having committees members regularly coming to council to present stuff, and if we're having the process of submitting staff reports, think first about, does this need to go to a committee? I think all of that would make it a lot more fluid in terms of our interaction with these committees.
Thank you, Councillor Wright.
I'm actually liking this side of the conversation and where we're going with this more than what I was thinking where we were headed with this. I think if we're going to do, more training, have clear policies and procedures in place that they know that they need to follow, and they get to come to council and engage with us, and we're going to make a point more of bringing things to them for their advice when they're an advisory committee. I think they'll feel more engaged, more useful, and more connected altogether than what we're seeing right now. I mean, you had commented you had coffee with someone whose mind was blown over the fact that they actually needed to bring motions to council. That it was a new concept, which, and we're in the 4th year. So, we clearly lost the thread there. And I think if we have those policies and procedures in place and it's more clear, and then maybe there's touch points throughout the 4 years where, we go to the chairs, whether it's the council members on the committee, and say, okay, where are you seeing some gaps in your knowledge of what needs to happen? Like, where can I fill that in? What questions can I answer? I think we'll get a lot further ahead than what we're seeing right now.
Thank you for that. I've been reflecting on this quite a lot since our last meeting, where we were talking about the Rural Advisory Committee things, and not to pick on Rural Advisory, because I feel quite badly actually about how that process went. And had we had some process similar to what we're talking about, we wouldn't have lost that information coming out of that survey, or it would have been presented to us, and we would have been asked through a microphone to do something about it. Without requiring necessarily a recommendation through motion. We would have realized, oh, hey, they want us to do something here, instead of just receiving a survey for information, which is essentially what happened. So Go ahead, Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor. Something that I've thought about quite a bit as we're looking at this is that organizational structure and behavior is challenging at the best of times. I mean, it's an entire academic field, draws from sociology and management science and all of these things. It is difficult to set up an organization, a business, a corporation that has very clear flows of work and command structures and all of those things. And we've had conversations during this term about restructuring, moving departments here and there to make things work well. And several of our committees in particular are committees that we have the committee because we don't have the department. And so the committee kind of sits alongside the organizational structure rather than in the middle of it. And so I think the reason that we tend to underutilize our committees is because they're not necessarily reporting to anyone. Nobody misses them if they don't have a recommendation. That those kinds of things. And because the committee sit alongside that, we're almost guaranteed to underutilize them. And yet at the same time, again, we have these committees because we don't have that department. And so what ultimately ends up happening is that it puts a lot of onus on whatever counselor is on that committee, but most especially, it puts a lot of onus on the deputy clerk, who is guiding all of them. And if ever at any point something is missed, it's not just that she's dropped the ball, it's that all of us have dropped the ball and she also couldn't catch it because she's holding all the balls. And so I don't want to, I think part of the reason why this proposal was so far outside the box is because nobody knows what the inside of the box looks like quite so well as Jessica. And I appreciate her work so much. And so I don't want to miss the opportunity to say that we could make 100 changes here that could potentially improve the way that our committees work. But I don't want to miss saying that we also should look at better supporting our staff. And maybe that means, a lot of municipalities have a committee support member of the clerk's department. Jessica wears that hat along with many others. If there's any way that we can better resource that department, I think that this is an opportunity. Not to say that this was a cry for help, but it is an indication that we need more.
Councillor Boutwell. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Councillor Wheeldon, I think that I'm very much on the same page as you. Tying into a conversation that we had a couple of months ago with the, what was that advisory group that asked for council member to be on it? We had the words over it.
Oh, the Food Policy Council.
Food Policy Council, thank you. So if we are essentially allowing any group to come and ask for council representation at any given time, and we're creating, I understand you don't need to be there for those staff, but it doesn't mean that we won't have more committees that we make of council. I like the idea because I do know how much your office in general is taxed, and that there's all these small projects. I know we talked about the Mount Hope Cemetery a year and a half ago, and how that is a major project that just doesn't ever move forward because there's not the ability to do that work. And that's actually a really important work from a community standpoint. But anyways, I digress. So perhaps we do need to look at our structure. I do know that this municipality has been run fairly lean over the last generation, we'll call it. And we're growing, and maybe it's time to grow a little bit.
Thank you for that. CAO.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Council. I've just been jotting down some notes. So I think first and foremost, staff can do a better job. So when I first came here, I don't think we were doing updates at the council level. There was a struggle with getting that communication back to the committee. And I think part of that, there's some legacy committees, I would say, that have operated the same way and they continue to move forward and have members that have been on the committee for a long time. And then there's some newer committees. And I think from a staff's perspective, we need to do a better job at doing that training from the get-go. We need to explain the expectation. There needs to be budgets in place, whether we call it a work plan or, just a plan for the year. What do you want to have done? What is the implications? I know there's some committees that have a larger budget than others. Some committees are getting shirts. Other committees might not be getting shirts. Seems silly, but I think we need to be the same across the board. I do believe that the live streaming will help the process. I think it'll make it a little more structured. To go to like a working group without having staff oversight, I think is a bad idea. If I put on my clerk hat from years ago, that's how committees were initially, and it was a disaster. And that's why staff now step in. I think staff need to be stronger, and this isn't to take away from our deputy clerk or other members of the clerk's staff, but I think there's been a position where it feels like they can't speak up and say, no, don't do this. So perhaps, Candace, myself can participate in some of those meetings early on. I get the sense that people are generally happy with the existing committees, and maybe that's where we stay and we just do a better job. I don't want to say that we don't need more staff. I'm sure every department would say they would need more staff. So to take a look at really where those holes are, I don't know that it's a committee clerk, but potentially that's something that we could look at. Sorry, I just want to make sure. I think to the draft minutes, we have the approved minutes that come to council. There's no reason that we can't have the draft minutes come to council. And if that creates some dialogue, but I do think that inviting the members to come and speak to council is also a better idea. And again, setting that up ahead of time so that members know the expectation and that we have that streamlined so we don't have these gaps along the way.
Madam Clerk.
Also, the draft minutes on the agenda would be great. And we do have it on here. It says reports, minutes of statutory committees, boards, and external agencies. They can report to council at that point too. So you were saying about having members come, when you speak about the draft minutes, well, if there's a report that needs to come forward from a committee, it can come forward at that point as well. And then they can come and speak to it as well then. They don't have to be a delegate per se. That's their opportunity then.
Councillor Butwell.
So I'm getting a sense that the room is shifted from our first meeting on this item, and that what we had, the system that we had, the structure that we had could work if we all worked it a little bit better. Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm sort of forming a motion in my head, but I just need people to keep talking for a second.
Okay. So I'm very appreciative of the ideas brought forward by our deputy clerk. I think that if nothing else, it has allowed us to have a conversation that causes us to look at ourselves versus putting the problem somewhere else. Not meaning you, I mean myself as a member of council and the people around this table, because I do know that we know that volunteerism is a challenge. And we know that we see a lot of the same names on these committees for multiple years, but that actually means they really care. And despite the frustrations, they continue to come out. And I would hate to think that we've done a disservice by not, working with them a little bit better. But I fully think that we should consider doing just a better job at what we're supposed to be doing rather than changing anything.
Yeah, and I think by and large, our committees are working fine. We have a few, I think, that are wondering where they belong. And I think it's good for us to work through this process because I think we'll allow the other committees also to come along and provide some reporting that we're not getting at the moment as well. So I'm actually quite enthused about what tomorrow might bring. CAO.
Sorry, thank
No.
you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just the one thing I did not include, which I think it's important, is staff certainly can do a better job at engaging our committees as well. And I know there have been things that have come forward and it's like, oh, I should have sent that to the committee. So we need to be more mindful. And if that means adding it to a staff report, I'm not opposed to that. We can take a look. Maybe that is the best way to keep that reminder active because there are lots of times where something, we get focused. It's like, get it back to council and we don't actually stop to think, is there a committee out there that could provide some feedback on this particular initiative? So we can certainly do a better job there as well.
So I have three more things to talk about before we go on. And they're just comments that were made that I want to speak to. The one about council only chairs. I understand that the municipality of Port Hope has gone down this road. I have seen chairs from the community and chairs from electeds that are awesome. And I have seen chairs from the community and chairs from electeds that are horrible. So I don't think it matters whether you're elected to council or not. You can be a good and or bad chair, sometimes in the same meeting. So been there, by the way. I have some really good chairs that are community members. And so I wouldn't want to see them not have the opportunity to chair a meeting because we create a policy that only electeds are allowed to do certain things. We're trying to engage the community and not push people aside. So that's just, I think, my hope and my point. Most of our committees meet quarterly-ish, correct? And I wonder if we could include in this process that they meet quarterly or as required by council. So if we send an item to them for advice, staff could then call a meeting of that committee to more urgently, and then there might be other business as well to talk about that's further ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is the way, not that specific, but that the clerk and or the chair of the committee can call meetings as required. So if there was something that council brought to me for a committee's attention, it would.
Okay.
That would have been.
That's perfect. And I know that there was a time in Brighton that people, committees were meeting on a much more regular basis, and there was some concern about dollars and cents and why are they meeting on a 3-week rotation when there's really not much to talk about. So there's a balance there. But if council refers something to a committee for advice, that committee should meet and provide that advice as expeditiously as possible. And so the other item I've just noted here is the concern about getting a little too into the weeds operationally. We have a couple of committees, I think, that do that from time to time. It is a natural thing for them to do because of the work they're doing and the work they're talking about. It becomes incumbent then on the council representatives to make sure that those guidelines are up and that we're not talking about brushing and ditching, as an example. That we are talking about if there's a change to a policy with regard to brushing and ditching, fair game. If we're talking about, hey, Bill, you better get down Telephone Road, that's offside. Right? Okay. And those are my comments. So now we need a motion to provide direction. I'm going to suggest that the motion we've got can't even be fixed because it sounds to me, and I'm just going to talk out loud and you can tell me whether this is true. It sounds to me we want to keep these committees sort of as is, but provide policies and procedures for better reporting of in-person reports to council by chairs and co-chairs and vice chairs, et cetera, whatever title we want to give those folks, and provide draft minutes as well, and continue, of course, that policy where the clerk and the chair can call a meeting when an item is referred to those committees by council. Do we need a motion for that, or can we would it be just simply defer this or refer this back to staff for a report?
I feel like this is a pop quiz and I'm going, me. So we could vote on the motion, defeat it.
But the motion is to provide direction to staff.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
I thought it was. The report
That's why I didn't read it, because it makes no sense to read a motion
that we don't.
that doesn't do anything.
Okay.
So if we can either refer this back to staff for report, if staff feels that we've been clear on the conversation, or we can draft a motion of direction. CAO? Deputy Clerk?
Here we go. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I don't think there's anything, I understand what you're saying about the motion. The motion can stay as is and direct staff to bring back a report. I've taken diligent notes about the expectation But just a quick summary, in general, committee staying as is, no consolidation of Apple Fest or community events, and no consolidation of rural advisory, environmental sustainability and justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And as I see it, the committees of council administration policy coming back with some updates. So I'm fine with it staying as just direction to staff. You've provided me direction, and I'll bring back a report if you want to just add that in on the bottom.
Could you say that last bit again?
If you just want to add to the recommendation, just that and council direct staff to bring back a report with updates to the committee policy.
Councillor Butwell, before I. Thank you, Councillor Wheeldon.
I just wanted to point to the fact that we will get one more committee meeting before the election. Most of them, I think, get one September meeting, and then we'll be. What I would love is for us to be able to tell the people who have been sticking it out through their frustration all term that, hey, you should come back next year because it's gonna be a little bit different, and here's what you can look forward to.
Thank you for that. I think you'll be able to deliver that message to your committees when the time comes. When could we anticipate a policy update coming to council?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, by the July meeting, I would say, just to give me some leeway. We do have a conference that I'm away at next week, so.
So I was going to write at a future meeting, but I know there are some members of council who like specific dates. So I'm looking at you, Councillor Butwell. You like specific dates. So council, do we want it at a future meeting or do we want to bring it to the July meeting? July? Yeah.
That's the goal. Do we have a meeting in August?
Mhm.
We do. Then why don't we do it for August? Because then we will have some sort of resolution to give to the committee members by the September meeting. Because that's what I was going to say. So I think it's important, especially for the members of the community who are either watching or who are on the committee, for them to understand that.
So at a regular council meeting, no later than August. That way, if you happen to get it done for July, I can come to the July meeting. Go ahead.
I would think that, we talk about staff and they can do better and do more, but they have a really busy few months coming up. And these policies and procedures aren't going to make any difference until 2027. So the fact that we could maybe get a little bit of a teaser as to what this is going to be, I don't see that this needs to be done right today. If our committee's members are engaged, they're going to hear what we're doing. And we can carry that message because that's our job. So I really don't want to tax staff at this particular time, especially the clerk's department. I know Jessica was busy at Codrington yesterday. There's a lot of election stuff coming on, and I really don't think it needs to be done before the end of the year.
Well, it should be done before the new council gets inaugurated so that there's guidelines for that council to move forward. Yeah. I'll read what I've written and you can all suggest whether you want to throw it on the floor or not. That council directs that no committees shall be consolidated, and further that council directs staff to provide committee policy updates at a regular council meeting no later than August. It's moved by Councillor Butwell. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Wright. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you all. Yes. Pardon? Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just want to say, yeah, I agree. Council, this was a great discussion with all the committees. It was a great discussions that were had, and the goal is to improve. And that was the goal of the report in the very first place, is just, I felt like things weren't working. And if we can get them to work, then that's great too, regardless of how it happened.
Thank you for that. Good discussion, Council. I do appreciate it. The next item is termination notice, Integrity Commissioner, closed meeting investigator, effective January 2027. Madam Clerk, we've read your report. Have you anything to add or highlight?
No, not at this time, Mayor.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that Council receive staff report CLK 2026-59 for information, and that Council direct staff to provide 30 days notice to Principals Integrity. And the staff recommend that Council appoint ADR Chambers as Integrity Commissioner, the Ontario Ombudsman be recognized as the Municipal Closed Meeting Investigator as of June 30th, 2026. And further, that a bylaw be brought forward to the June 22nd, 2026 council meeting. Council meeting for council's execution. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor. Just two quick comments. The first is that I love how little we had to use them this year, or this term. So that's great. Good job, everyone. But also I wanted to point out how much I relied on the advice of the Integrity Commissioner in the first year of the term, when I was brand new and was freaked out that I was going to do something wrong. And we had good, stable, simple advice that was very encouraging and supportive and accessible to us. And so, obviously, I hope that I will meet the new Integrity Commissioner as well. But I just wanted to highlight for the public that this is a great tool, and I'm glad that we have one.
Thank you for that. I'll point out that the Integrity Commissioner has been used quite a lot, actually, in this term of council. We just don't get the reports because they're not report worthy, or the Integrity Commissioner has decided that they have provided education to the person issuing the complaint or the concern rather than providing a report to council for whatever it is. So they have been used well, but we don't have clarity on that because there's no need to report to council on it. Anything further from members of council? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you. What do we know about this Integrity Commissioner other than this persons has been sort of retained by the council? Do we know, or by the county? Anything else that we need to know? And I guess, yeah, I just want to know. And as far as the ombudsman goes, are they available all the time, anytime as well? And what's their track record?
Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. CAO Arthurs and I had a meeting with ADR Chambers. They're like any other integrity commissioners. They have a good profile. They have had good references. They have school boards that they deal with, a lot of different townships, larger municipalities as well. We had good conversation with them, and I feel confident that they'll work well for us. Again, it could be just a short-term thing. It's just to get us through until we get into our new elected council. And if they decide that they don't want to continue with ADR Chambers, then we can put an RFP out at that time and go forward. I just wanted to get this done before we went into lame duck, and I didn't want to put this onus on to the new council right away.
Thank you. And Principals Integrity they are retiring at the end of the year, as I understand too. The question on the Ombudsman's office being available.
The Ombudsman's office, so you have to go online and contact them. Sometimes it takes them a little while, sometimes it doesn't. They're cost effective because they don't charge us. That's the only real good thing about it, is that we don't get for frivolous and vexatious complaints coming in. They monitor those, and then we don't have to pay for that. But other than that, the Ombudsman office was always used before. They seem reliable and they know what they're doing, so it's just an offer. I mean, we don't have to go that route. We could hire them to be our closed meeting investigators as well. We just thought for the short time that we're doing this until we get into the new elected council, that this is the way we would go.
The only real concern I think I can express with regard to the ombudsman's office is that, I don't know, with regard to this particular ombudsman that is currently in office, but there have been Ontario ombudsmen, ombudspeople, ombuds, I don't know what the right gender neutral term is, that have allowed mandate creep. So they are investigating a closed session matter and they think they discover something else, so they start digging around. And it hasn't caused problems in Brighton, other than staff time to weed out information and provide documents, etc. But that's the only thing with if we were to hire a closed meeting investigator, they would investigate the closed meeting, whereas the ombuds office can take that elsewhere, wherever they want. Exactly right. They can start investigating wherever they want. So I don't think it's going to hurt Brighton for the next 6 months or so. Any further discussion? CAO.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor to Council. I noticed recently that the position has been posted.
Hmm.
So it appears that we will have somebody new in that seat. I do think it does offer some impartiality, which I like. There is, this is not somebody who's contracted to the municipality, and my dealings with them is they're very practical. They're very straightforward. They're, they ask the questions. Sometimes they dig a little bit more than they need to, but I think it's $350 an hour if we can get that for no cost. And, hopefully we can keep any closed meeting, done appropriately, and we don't ever have to worry about it regardless.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Next report is a CAO ongoing report, capital projects update. CAO, do you have anything to add or highlight?
No, Mr. Mayor, not at this time.
A motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson. The council received the CAO ongoing report, capital projects update. Is there any discussion? Councillor Botwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, wouldn't be a update report unless I was asking Director Lennon, sorry, I know someone with the last name Lenny, and it gets me, about this tennis club and pickleball club agreements. We're nearly 2 years into this, and I think that that this needs to be brought to some sort of resolution. I don't know what that might be, what that might look like. I am sure that your predecessor and you have done everything that you could to be as open and communicative as possible, but it remains a municipal asset, and we do have an obligation to our call them taxpayers, although I know that's a really old term, to get this formalized. Again, coming up on 2 years now.
Director Lennon.
Through the mayor, yes, this process has been a lengthy one. The soccer club is a new change in executive. So I think late for fall of 2025, they had agreed that they could sign the agreement as drafted, and the executive changed, and they have a different vision for the club.
Did you just say
Tennis.
soccer?
He did. Tennis.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
Apologies.
It's okay.
Yes, the tennis club, the executive changed, and they have a different vision. I've met with them several times now to talk about that. One of the key factors is changing ownership of the lights, which both sides are in agreement that can happen easily enough, but it is part of the agreement or not. But they have a vision, I guess, let's say it's different than the previous executive, and they're not prepared to sign the agreement as drafted. And they've offered to potentially come to council as a delegation to kind of share their vision, but that's where things sit. And it's been difficult to tie down times to meet with the executive to move things forward. And I don't want to throw the executive under the bus, but that's been the discussion so far, is that they're not prepared to sign the agreement, and they'd like to see a different model of managing the tennis courts in Brighton.
So if I may follow up, clarify, just for those watching at home, who owns the lights?
Currently, the tennis club owns the lights. They installed the lights.
Mhm.
And part of when I joined the municipality, part of my understanding was that part of this agreement was to change ownership of the lights from the tennis club to the municipality. And like I said, that isn't going to be a difficult thing to do. One of the challenges was there was an expectation that the lights be maintained to the Ontario Tennis Association standards, but the lights weren't installed to those standards originally. So we just need some language to identify that. But as far as paying the hydro bill for the lights, the ownership would transition that cost to the municipality. So the tennis club or staff, or there's no disagreement on changing the ownerships. It's just the operation of the tennis courts in general and the model that we currently use for user groups that they don't necessarily agree with.
So, the transfer of ownership being something that was discussed in the past, this is the first time I've heard about that. No?
No, this came to council last year
So I just.
as part of the original
Because there
agreement.
were they did two presentations, correct? The tennis club did two separate.
They
came to
made a
one-
presentation and then they made comments during the
Okay,
discussion on their agreement.
okay, so that's not in dispute then.
That's correct, yeah.
And then the cost of those lights is not in dispute. Is the maintaining them to a certain tennis world standard, is that something that was brought up last year? Because that doesn't sound familiar to me either.
That was the last discussion point in the draft agreement, that the tennis club wanted commitment from the municipality to maintain the light to the Ontario Tennis Association standards. But because they weren't installed to those standards, we didn't want to commit to that.
Okay,
We'd say we in the agreement, we agreed to maintain the lights to a reasonable, safe standard. And at that point, the executive was okay with that. And then their leadership changed. And it's not so much that they don't want to work with a municipality, they just have a different vision.
so is the primary sticking point then the maintaining them to a certain standard?
No.
Because it sounds,
Sorry, no, the primary sticking point is how the courts are used and who uses them when.
right, because I've seen some posts online saying that the courts are reserved like all evening, every evening during the week, and that was what was prompting me to kind of push a little bit more at this point, because I think we have we need to formalize this. We have an entire community that wants to be able to play tennis in the evenings, but they can't necessarily. There has to be a way to bring this to some sort of conclusion.
Through the mayor, for clarity, there's an agreement that we've been working on for ownership of the lights and just some general responsibilities. But the actual booking of the tennis courts is handled through our booking agreements. We have an agreement with the tennis club for the booking. They request their times of day throughout the season, just like baseball and soccer, hockey. They're all fall under the same rules as far as booking their use of the facility. So we do have an agreement with the tennis club for 2026 for the booking. And they use a lot of the prime time, if you will, in the evenings, but not every evening. But that's outside of the agreement that is under discussion with as far as ownership of the lights and responsibilities go.
Okay, I saw one posting in particular that says we have the courts for this time for drop-in. So not specific programming or anything. I'm sure you're monitoring all of this kind of thing, but it was a Friday evening, so I'm noticing the evenings are being booked up, and is an actual allocation schedule part of the discussion? So that, no more than 30% of the total scheduled prime times can be booked by the one club.
Director?
Through you, that's a consideration, but if a user group requests certain times, and historically tennis clubs requested the same times every evening, then those are approved each year through a new user group an agreement. Part of the formal agreement for responsibilities was to outline as well that the practice that was in place, that the tennis club would accept members of the public to join their club through those evenings. If courts were available, sometimes they only need one court, and they would work with others and even encourage them to join their club. So there's that understanding, and we were going to formalize that, but it doesn't change the requests for the times and dates that they want the courts.
I'm just going to mull this a little bit if somebody else wants to say something.
Anything further on the CAO ongoing report, capital projects update? CAO?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council. Just to go back prior to Director Lennon being here, part of this stemmed from a cost being attributed to use of the tennis courts. So the discussion that was had with the executive at the time and through council was to provide them with the ability to continue running the programs they were running at a reduced cost. So certainly they do have some prime time, but our manager worked really hard to try to open up some of those prime times as well. So that was sort of put in place as this agreement was continued to be, as the agreement continued to be worked on. So I would assume that that is still happening, that there's expected to be some openings for the public. But at that time, that was a discussion with council that they were going to be allotted a certain amount of time at a reduced rate, a number of hours based, I believe, on a flat rate or an hourly rate that was reduced based on what we had brought forward in our user fees and charges bylaw because they weren't happy with the additional cost.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I understand that. I do recall us having a conversation around this table then. The fact of the matter is, though, we're almost 2 years later and without a signed contract, none of these desired changes actually have to happen. So that contract will solidify the agreement. So whatever work has been done in between then and now doesn't mean, with respect, it doesn't mean a hill of beans without a signed contract.
But that has already happened. The rescheduling has already happened.
The rescheduling has already happened.
It hasn't been codified, but it's already happened.
So without it being codified, that's what I mean. If it's not in writing, an agreement that's not reduced to writing is just going by the honor system of everyone involved. And I think that if we're talking about a private club, a private user group that has access to a municipal resource like this, that we do owe it to the people of the community. So
I think the onus is on the tennis club to come forward with what they would like to see in an agreement.
right,
because
because it's my understanding they're not coming.
Regardless of who owns the lights,
Right,
the surface is our facility.
right.
And so we can mandate who uses it when, should we choose to do that.
Should we?
We prefer to work with
I-
people, of course. We always prefer to collaborate and
Absolutely.
work with people, which we've done. We've come up with times and so on that works for, we hope, everyone, but probably not everybody, but it certainly works for the tennis club, works for the municipality, works for our manager in parks. We simply need the tennis club, I think, to wrap their heads around what they think their world's going to look like over the course of whatever time period they want, and codify that in a user agreement that makes sense for us and them.
Right.
But if they don't do that, we can tell them when they get to use the tennis courts. They're not their courts, they're our courts.
So has,
Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarity, for the hours that the tennis club use the courts, we do have a signed user agreement. Like every other user group for every other sport. So we have a signed agreement with the tennis club for the hours they use. It's separate from the agreement that we're talking about in this capital list.
Everything's good.
we'll talk.
And everything's working. Everything's working for both the tennis club right now and for the municipality. And we hope for the public in general. And if you're hearing differently, then please communicate that to Director Lennon.
So if everything's working now, there's no incentive to actually get this.
I think there is an incentive for the tennis club to get it done. I think they just have a time management issue. Director Lennon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yeah, from the current executive of the tennis club, they're motivated to have a separate agreement other than the user agreement to change the ownership of the lights, so they're not paying for the hydro bill anymore. but also to set a framework on how the courts are managed. So they're asking for something unique than any other user group, really. But they'd like to have that discussion. And so we've talked about that as a group. And so they're willing to meet and talk. They just have a different vision of how the courts should be managed. It's totally separate from the hours they've booked and signed. So, so something formal to look at that vision potentially, but primarily at this point, yeah, the user group pays for their hours and there's an agreement for that. And we just need to get the lights into municipal ownership.
And get to paper what it is they want in terms of the management of the asset,
Through the mayor,
like a
we'll have
proposal.
them present what they would like to see. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you all. Any further discussion on the CAO ongoing report capital projects update? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. We have no notices of motions and no motions, nothing listed under unfinished business, which brings us to bylaws. The first is with regard to an agreement with Hydro One Networks. It's moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an occupancy and use agreement between Hydro One Networks, Inc. and the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton for the installation of banners on utility poles. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. That one felt like a long time getting here too. I mean, I think it was just process. The next is with regard to County IT Standard Service Agreement. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor McCausland. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute an agreement between the Corporation of the County of Northumberland and the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton regarding the Northumberland County IT Standard Services Agreement effective June 1st, 2026. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Are there any opposed? That motion is carried. That brings us to reports, minutes of advisory committees of council and review teams and the mayor's report. The first is my report with regard to a proposed twinning agreement between Brighton, New York and Brighton, Ontario. I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wright, that council receive the report from the mayor regarding discussions with the town of Brighton, New York. The council authorizes the mayor to enter into a twinning agreement with Brighton, New York, United States of America. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Next are committee of council meeting minutes. These are from the Economic Development Committee of May 14th, the Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Committee of May 14th, Environmental Sustainability, January 27th, Accessibility, April 16th. I will ask Deputy Mayor or Councillor Rowley, anything coming out of the ECDev meeting?
I hope that you've all read it, and once again, good work by our team. It's nice to see this community improvement plan really coming to life. This is year number 2, and once again, 3 businesses, excuse me, within our DBIA catchment will see a little bit of a facelift. Be nice to see it done.
Very nice indeed. And Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, Councillors Butwell and Wheeldon, anything to point out? Go ahead, Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you. If you haven't heard enough from us tonight already, I wanted to just point out that we at this meeting agreed to once again support 2 different pride organizations in Municipality of Brighton for their events this month. So it's great that we're going to continue to have both the Pride Walk and the Pop-Up Pride event. So please do come on out, everyone, and participate. It's a great time.
Thank you for that. Environmental Sustainability, Councillors McCausland and Wheeldon, anything to add or highlight there? Thank you. Accessibility, Councillors Wheeldon and Wright, anything to point out there? Go ahead.
I did mention that this is Accessibility Awareness Week. We did not decide to have public events this year. Public events is fairly taxing on a committee. but we are going to be touring Brighton facilities as they become more accessible. It's a good opportunity for us to, as an accessibility committee, to go around and see the good work that our staff are doing. So I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you for that. Just by way of information, on that same vein, I was asked to come for a walk with someone who is in a wheelchair around their neighborhood to point out some concerns with sidewalks. I have agreed to do that. We connected in the winter. I said maybe when the snow goes away. Well, it's hopefully gone for now. So I'm going to have that that walk around the neighborhood, and I will certainly have some conversations with the director and probably provide some information to the committee as well. Go ahead, Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you for that, Mayor. We do have those conversations at committee as well, and our staff have been great about reminding us that there is a portal for starting tickets for our public works staff to address issues, and that has greatly reduced the amount of time we spend in the weeds, as you mentioned earlier. So please do utilize that portal. It works very well.
Thank you for that. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that Council receive the following committee meeting minutes as presented. Economic Development Advisory Committee of May 14th, 2026. Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee, May 14th, 2026. Environmental Sustainability Advisory Committee, January 27th, 2026. Accessibility Advisory Committee, April 16th, 2026. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. That brings us to reports and minutes of statutory committees, boards, and external agencies. The first is the Lower Trent Conservation Authority. Anything to add or highlight here, Councillors Wheeldon or Wright? Councillor Wheeldon?
I did want to point out that one of the challenges that Lower Trent has had is that the province has been freezing fees. And it just so happened that we adjusted our fee structure at a time that fell outside of the period of the most recent freeze. And so our fee structure was able to be updated this year after all.
Miracles never cease. Anything further? Councillor Wright?
I think I would also like to say too that because of the amalgamations and the lack of insight, despite the statements that no one will lose their jobs, it is creating a sense of instability for the employees of conservation authorities. And we've already lost now 2 employees. That is going to cause delays for permits and approvals as they flow through Lower Trent Conservation. So I just want to be clear that those delays are not because our staff aren't doing good work, but it's out of the instability that this current situation is creating.
Thank you for that. I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that Council receive the Lower Trent Conservation Authority April 2026 board meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. The next is from the Downtown Business Improvement Area Association meeting. Councillor Rowley, anything to add or highlight here? Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. The Council received the Downtown Business Improvement Area Association March 12th and April 9th, 2026 meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? Councillor Butwell.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Through you to, I guess I will start with Councillor Rowley. I have a question about the April 9th minutes under correspondence. I'll just give you a moment. So under correspondence, it says Integrity Commission conclusion was received and reviewed by the board. Copies were provided upon request. Downtownbrighton.com has been updated with all meeting material to be added as well as creating. So my question is, where's the attached report?
I don't think that report needs to be attached, just as all other integrity commissioner reports aren't always public. That's all the information I have on that.
So if it was daylighted through this, through the minutes that were created, then there should be a report attached to this, as far as I'm concerned. Perhaps the CAO might be able to clarify.
CAO?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Botwell. Because staff don't attend these meetings, we're not aware of the report. Certainly, if there is a report provided to this council, it's made available and made public. So we can certainly reach out, and if it's a similar process there, we can ask that they make that available.
Okay, thank you. So because the DBIA is a committee of this council,
We're not, no, they're
We're
not.
not?
They're statutory committee.
statutory committee, but reporting to this council. That's how I understand it.
Reporting through the council.
Through the council.
Not to the council. We
Through the
don't
council.
provide direction to the
No, we
DBIA. It's not an advisory committee.
No. But if we are seeing minutes, because I believe that we are responsible for the DBIA.
Financially.
So if there is a report that was made and received, because generally, so was it what was I'm not going to ask what it was because we haven't received it at this point. But generally reports are only provided when there were findings that needed to be acted upon. So if it is included in the minutes, then generally, if a report is referred to, it needs to be attached to the minutes. I believe that's proper reporting, CAO.
So,
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Botwell. It hasn't been a process to attach reports and that sort of thing from even our advisory committee. So as we look at the structure, it might be something that we want to address. Certainly the DBIA is different than our advisory committee. So I would like to go back and along with the clerk's department and determine what their obligation is if it does align with the municipality. Again, if the municipality receives something that is provided to council, it does become public. So if the DBIA is expected to follow the same rules, then that report should be public and we can ask that it be provided. But I'm just not sure, so I don't want to speak out of turn.
Right, and I think that's what I was getting at, perhaps asking the wrong way. So if I could leave it with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
and in theory, if this is a public facing report, we could reach out to the Integrity Commission and ask for a copy. And they would be obligated to provide it to the person asking, any member of the public.
Yep, and I believe that. So how would it, if there were findings, it becomes part of public record. So how would that be searched by the public?
You could request a freedom of information request through the clerk's office, or just reach out to the Integrity Commissioner.
No, I mean, if a member of the public was searching for a copy of this report.
They could either request an FOI through the clerk's office.
So there is some cross pollination here. Sorry,
No,
no?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, because it's not a document of the municipality. It's not a record of ours. It's a record of the DBIA. And that's where I just want to ensure that the rules are the same because I don't know if they're expected to follow the same rules as the municipality. Certainly, if it was a document that was in our possession, that is different. But this is a separate entity. Although they are tied to the municipality, this is their document, not ours.
so I think at this stage, if you reach out to the Integrity Commissioner, if it is a publicly facing document, they would provide it to you, or they would let you know that it's not. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mayor. The Integrity Commissioner, generally, when they do a report, they come to speak about that report at a meeting. I'm not sure how it works for the DBIA, but for council, when we receive a report from the Integrity Commissioner about a findings, they present it. I put it on the agenda, but they present it. So if that was not done, then I'm not sure if they wanted it to be made available to the public. Would have to be a question to them.
I'll wait for the CAO to
Very well.
consult.
Well, any further discussion on the DBIA minutes? All in favor? Are there any opposed? That motion is carried. And the next, it comes from the Brighton Public Library, April 22nd meeting, Councillors McCausland and Wright. Anything to add or highlight here? No? No? I have a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council received the Brighton Public Library Board, April 22nd, 2026 meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Moving along to correspondence, direction items, endorsements, communications, and petitions. The first piece of correspondence comes from the Brighton Garden Club, With a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor McCausland, that council support the request from the Brighton Garden Club to place a metal structure and plaque in the Municipal Centre Garden on Alice Street in recognition of the club's 100th year anniversary. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. I trust that staff will reach out to the Garden Club to offer some advice on the installation of said monument. Next item is FYI correspondence with updates from Northumberland County. With a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council receive the Northumberland County updates May 25th to June 5th, 2026. Is there any discussion? Councillor McCausland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. It is a very busy month because it's also Men's Health Month. So Men's Health Month is observed annually in June, raising awareness to prevent health issues and encourage men and boys to prioritize their physical and mental well-being. So check on the men in your life. Sometimes they need some loving too.
And we're just going to let that one hang out there. Anything further? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. I speak for all the men in the room with thanks to you, Councillor McCausland. Is there anyone who has a question? Anyone in the gallery who has a question with anything that appeared on tonight's agenda? Come on up, Steph. Question period is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions about items that appeared on this evening's agenda. Members are asked to state their name for the record before asking their questions. A maximum of 5 minutes is set aside for question period. Language, content, and conduct must remain respectful at all times. Questions will be received and answered by the mayor or by a member of council or staff if designated by the mayor.
Good evening, and thank you for letting me do this. My name is Steph Hales. I am part of the Justice, Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Committee. I really appreciate what you guys have done and the way you've spoken about the committees and that tonight, and the fact that we are going to be continuing, which really does make a difference to the way I approach my stature on that particular committee. The one thing I do want to say is I want to echo some of the words what Councillor Wheeldon has said, and that is I'd like to see more of a working agenda, something where we can actually become involved in, not just something which can be, built to us and then we just have to discuss it and give it back to you. I'd like to have some way of communicating to the community as a member of that committee, as opposed to as just brought to me. What I mean by that is, although I had to declare myself as part of the church group, St. Trinity's Church, at the time when there was any discussion or any voting on funds and that given to them, I have stepped down from that group so that I can actually partake as a member of the committee more than a member of that church group. So that is just one thing. But I'm also very interested in the disabilities of people in this community. I'm very interested in the inclusion of other people in the committee which are unable to attend meetings like this or unable to walk down the sidewalks and into shops because there's no ramps and things like that. It really is a heartfelt kind of subject to me as well. So I'm asking you that when you do put your recommendations or your motion together, that at the end of the day, you make that motion so that we actually can partake in doing things as opposed to just sitting back and just listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You have an odd way of asking a question. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hales. Appreciate your time. It's all right. Is there anyone else who may have a question with regard to anything that appeared on tonight's agenda? We have no closed session, which brings us to our confirmatory bylaw. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton Council meeting held on June 1st, 2026. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. The June 1st, 2026 council meeting adjourned at 8:29 PM. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Everyone drive safely home and may God save the king.